Well, friends, it's Andrew here again, and today we're at episode 119. And we're continuing in Matthew's Gospel. We're picking it up now at the beginning of chapter 16, and we're reading verses 1 to 4. The Pharisees and Sadducees came, and to test Jesus they asked him to show them a sign from heaven. He answered them, "When it's evening, you say, 'It will be fair weather, for the sky is red.' And in the morning, 'It'll be stormy today, for the sky is red and threatening.' You know how to interpret the appearance of the sky, but you cannot interpret the signs of the times. An evil and adulterous generation asks for a sign, but no sign will be given it, except the sign of Jonah." Then he left them and went away. Well, I've struggled with this text. I understand, I think, a bit of the Jonah bit. I struggle to understand why it is that Jesus says that an evil and adulterous generation seeks for a sign. So I've sat with it, and I've come to some conclusions. Now, they may not be accurate, but this is where I've come to, and you can judge for yourself whether you think I'm onto something or not. And the way I did it was by focusing on the word for adulterous. Because evil is one thing, we know it's something that's bad, it's morally bad, but how, why, and what way? I think it's the word adulterous that actually gives us a clue. So what is adultery? It's where someone is not satisfied with what they have. They're not satisfied with the strength, the purity, the beauty of the relationship that they're engaged in. And he and she or she are looking over the fence at some other that they might idealize or see as perfect or as in some way superior. A better option, a better choice, something that is grander and more significant, that makes the heart beat more strongly than the relationship in which we are in. We're failing to treasure what we already have, what is ours, what we're already engaged in. We're failing to see the strength, the beauty, the grace, the goodness that is right under our very noses. We're failing to see, and I think this is probably at the core of it, what God is already doing right now. Religious leaders failed to see that God was at work in the everyday, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and they failed to see it in the ministry of Jesus. They couldn't conceive that God could possibly be at work in this simple man with a Galilean accent from the boondocks, who came out of, sounds like he came out of a fishing village, as a person that God would be radically using. They weren't able to see what was happening in the ministry of Jesus because they couldn't see that God could possibly work that way, through a humble, gentle soul. That people were getting fed, people were getting healed, people were getting restored and given new life in all sorts of ways. They failed to see that God was actually at work because it wasn't dramatic enough for them. It didn't appear to be miraculous enough for them. And Jesus says, you can discern the weather in ordinary everyday life. You look at the sky, and we all know the little ditty that we learnt as kids. Red sky at night, shepherd's delight. Red sky in morning, shepherd's warning. They all knew it. They identified this. They could see the signs of the times in terms of the weather. But they're not recognizing that God is at work in exactly the little ways in the ordinary things of life every day. That God might work in that way is not enough for them. They want more. They're looking for big displays of power and affection. The ordinary is inadequate, so they're looking over the fence. They're looking for a God who is able to do so much more than the God that Jesus is portraying and is showing to them. And they will not be satisfied with anything yet less. And I think this is why Jesus describes them as adulterous. They can't see what they have now, because God is at work in the day-by-day provision of the small things. Their daily bread, which he talks about in the Our Father, give us this day our daily bread, enough for the day. And it has always been thus. And even the thing that they would have referred back to, the provision of the manna in the desert by Moses, do a miracle like that. It happened 6 days a week. Just enough for the day. They had to go and gather God's provision every day, except for the day before the Sabbath, when they could gather enough for 2 days and it didn't go off. But every other day, if they kept it to the following morning, it had gone off. So we see God at work providing for us in the everyday. They also fail to recognize that Jesus is a representation of the character of God. And I spoke about this on Sunday. It'll be a Sunday a week ago now for when you see this video. But the title of my message was The Christ-like God. And it was E. Stanley Jones, that great missionary to India who was there for over 50 years, who had such insight and understanding. And he basically says, we look at Jesus and we look to him to see God-like characteristics in Jesus. We ask, in what ways is Jesus like God? But E. Stanley Jones puts it the other way around. He says we need to recognize that God acts in a Christ-like way. As Hebrews 1:3 says, that Jesus is the exact representation of the Father. That we can expect God to act in a Christ-like manner. And so that when Jesus in John chapter 14 is talking about having seen the Father, he's talking with Philip and the disciples. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. He's saying that when you're actually considering God, God is like me. God is Christ-like. So when we're looking to see how God is, what is important to God, what the attitudes and the behaviours and the loves of God are, we only need to look as far as Jesus. Because as C. Stanley Jones says, God doesn't move outside of that. He's portrayed to us what he's really like. But they see Jesus as something less. They see him as a pretender, as an interloper, as one who does not belong here, certainly not speaking for the God that they believe they represent. So Jesus describes their seeking after signs as adulterous. They failed to recognize the God who is with them and working among them. Instead, they prefer a God that exists only in their imagination and not in reality. Hence the allusion to the sign of Jonah. Jonah's sign, if you want to think about it, was of a redemptive death. It was something he ultimately embraced as he instructed his fellow travellers in the boat to throw him into the churning sea so that they might live. He said to them, the only way you're going to survive this is if I die. The only way you're going to get back to your families, back to dry land, is if you throw me into the sea, let me die so that you can live. That's the only way you're going to get out of that. And they tried everything to not do that. In the end, they had no other recourse. So they throw him into the sea. The same sign, says Jesus, will be played out in my redemptive death. One who offers up my life willingly with no one taking it from me, so that you might ultimately live. That's the sign that you'll receive. Now, this is totally counterintuitive. They're looking for a dramatic, powerful, interventionist God. And Jesus offers them a humble, self-giving, self-sacrificial God who's willing to go to his own death in the most humiliating and brutalized way, all in order to demonstrate the love of God for humanity. You need to know this is what we're prepared to do because we love you. Because we love you. And that is the character and kind of God who loves and watches over us. The picture they have in their minds of what God is like is an adulterous caricature. I hope you found it thought-provoking and helpful. God bless you.